All right. Hey, everybody. I am on the call with a old dear, not old. JC, how old are you?
47.
47. When I say old, you know what I mean. A very old dear friend, JC Glick. JC, welcome to the No Fear podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Nice. So we of course need to establish your background and why and how we know each other. Why don't you? I'm just going to pass the mic to you because it's we've known each other. My God, like 15 years, 14, 12, over a decade.
Yeah. Yeah, well over a decade. I think we're going on. No, it's going to be 15 years this year.
Holy shit. Crazy. So we met. Can we say where we met? Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I was doing some work for the Army, asymmetric warfare, and you were part of that unit at the time. And why don't you just establish our relationship there, and then I'm going to dig into why I wanted you on the show after that.
Yeah. So I was in the asymmetric warfare group, and this was after. And this is a story I tell. So by the time we met, I had already done 5 combat tours with the Rangers. And I went to your course. Your instruction was part of the advisor training course, or the tactical training course. And I went to your first instruction, and I remember that, up to that point, I had always been told, you never take your firing hand off your weapon. You never take your firing hand off your weapon. I mean, I think it was ingrained into me. And you told us to do something that had me take my firing hand off my weapon. And I said, you don't do that. This isn't right. And you came at it from such a great place. You said, all right, well, let's try it your way. Let's try to do what you're saying. And of course it didn't work. And then he said, okay, well, try it the way I just showed you. And of course it worked. And at that moment, I remember it so vividly because I think it was a real turning point with just how I looked at everything and how I looked at how I teach, how I looked at my philosophy of things is, all right, you know what? There's no more absolutes. Things are not absolute anymore. I have to look at things a new way. So that struck me. And then, so I've been through, I think, your basic, your advanced, your instructor courses. When I left the asymmetric warfare group and was a battalion, brought you less about the combat stuff and more about the mindset stuff.
Hey, let me inject here.
Stuff.
Hey, brother, let me inject here because the internet cut out as it would when it cut out just at the point when you said when you left AWG, you went and took over a battalion. Just pick it up from there.
Something I I also should mention is, I realized after I'd been through all your courses and your mindset piece so I did 6 more combat tours with the asymmetric warfare group. And I realized that I'm not sure I knew how to fight before I learned from you. I think it was didn't fight. It's that I didn't fight with the right mindset, and being able to kind of think about the fight and then have such confidence in my ability. And so when I took over a battalion, I brought you in because I was less worried about the combat stuff and more worried about the mindset stuff on how you help people look at things in a very, very different way that enabled people to reach kind of their full capacity. And then since, I referenced you in my first book, A Light in the Darkness, I talk about kind of the things that you did to build capacity. And, there's really kind of in the second book, Meditations of an Army Ranger, there's really a whole chapter that's about kind of what I learned from you and what my co-author, Alice Atlanta, has learned from me as well. And so it's not only a friendship, but I really see you as a mentor who's really brought me so much to my mindset and how I attack things.
I appreciate that, man. I was going to jump in, but you corrected yourself. Or you said you felt like you didn't know how to fight, but how much do you weigh?
About 225.
225. You're a big ass dude. You've been in when most guys say, yeah, I've been in a real fight. They haven't been in the fights you've been in. And it wasn't that anybody, like, and one of the things about my system, as you know, this is certainly not the military or law enforcement side of our training, but one of our premises is that we are all human weapon systems, and that you don't need a particular training to decide to fight back. At the end of the day, that's that proverbial light switch, that switch from the fetal fear to indignation, and you're back in the fight. That's really what's happening in the untrained person. But the big stuff and the extrapolation and what I shared with you guys is, like, anybody can be emotionally, psychologically hijacked during sudden violence. So even the most trained people, and we've all seen, you and I have seen videos, CCTV, body cam, helmet cam, of badasses fucking freezing and flinching. It's just it's the stimulus gets introduced too quickly. The body's limbic system, amygdala, the whole neuroscience around physiology versus psychology. It's one of the things that I talk about, that we need to understand physiology before physicality. But I don't want to go down a rabbit hole and a tangent, because I want to talk about your stuff, the books, what you're doing now, how you're helping people. But I've shared with you, JC, the same stuff. I've been teaching now for 40 years. And of course it's more refined now, but there are people that sit there in my classes with their arms crossed, doodling, going, this is fucking bullshit. I've never seen him in the octagon. He's full of shit. Right. Or I thought he'd be taller. I had, so what made you special, and I think what has sustained our relationship, is we're very much the same way. I can read a quote or hear a statement, and it hits me like a fucking Hallmark card, and I want to, I'm not going to admit this live on a podcast, but I'll go to chick flicks with my wife and cry more than she does. I am a romantic, sensitive. I abhor violence, which is why I study it. And I think what connected us, I think we're very much the same, cut from that same emotional cloth, which is amazing to think of how many tours you did and what you did. And I think that's why you connected to my stuff, because it addressed and answered this dissonance in your heart and your soul, where you went, man, I need to be courageous now. I need to go do this. I'm going to protect my country. I'm going to protect the guys beside me, but I'm fucking scared. And so what I think you were able to see in the simplicity of my material, because there's so much psychobabble out there about performance, performance and all that. I had a SWAT cop who got medically discharged, and he was studying UCLA. He wrote me so many letters saying, like the stuff that they're teaching in sports psychology is so archaic and so robotic, begging for me to try and, get involved. And guess what? He made these introductions with all the professors and all the people. Nobody ever once returned a call. They don't want to hear from, some guy who intuited his system and has no pedigree or diploma. But I ramble, and I want to get back to your thoughts on this.
Well, before you go on, I want to, look, you and I are very similar, and I think it's such a great relationship, but I'm with you. So I work with these professional teams and NCAA teams, right? So I'm trying to do what you do with law enforcement and the civilian community and the military. I really try to bring to sports teams. And if it wasn't for a couple of really good guys like Ron Rivera, the head coach of the Carolina Panthers, James Borgio, the head coach of the Charlotte Hornets, excuse me, Dave Petramala, the head coach of Johns Hopkins lacrosse, some of these key coaches who were willing to listen to somebody who's very much like you, right? I don't have a degree in psychology or physiology or biology, but I did a whole bunch because of my post-traumatic stress. I did a whole bunch of research on brain science. I've spent my entire life leading, and being able to take I think you're right. You know, I always say, you say physiology before physicality. I talk about physiology before leading. Understand how the brain works before you lead somebody. For example, you know, discipline is not, it's not conducive to the human brain. The human brain does not want to be disciplined. It wants to survive. It survives through shortcuts. It survives however it can. So when you tell somebody whose prefrontal cortex isn't developed yet, under the age of 30, and you tell them you want to be you want them to be disciplined, you're not fighting that person. You're fighting their brain.
Right.
And so now you have to take away that adversarial idea, and you have to start thinking about, okay, I have to accept certain things, and I have to train differently. It's not that I can't. And we don't understand it, but you're right. Go ahead.
No, we're having some internet glitches, and you froze again. I'm going to blame that on the fact that you are in the country, because I got a landline hardwired in here. But I just want to try to recreate that, because it cuts out sometimes at key words, but it seems to be good right now. But you know, the rant and riff that you're on about a good leader needs to understand, and they've got to have various tools to engage, whether it's their staff or their kid or another soldier or whatever. That it's people can follow orders, but in the back of their mind, if they're thinking I'm going to die, or I suck, or I hope I don't screw up. And that's, you know, I haven't written this yet, but you know, in working with athletes, I differentiate, like a lot of people call themselves coaches, JC. And I always say, no, there's technicians, there's trainers and coaches. And a lot of coaches are really just technicians and trainers. They understand the biomechanics, they understand rep schemes, but they don't understand how to read body language and tone and juxtapose that against performance, and recognize how self-sabotage, fear, and shitty thinking is actually producing the results they don't want. Talk on that, because I know
So I talk to coaches all the time about the difference between, I think there's a difference between coaching and leading. Mm-hmm. And I see coaches as and I call coaches, you know, if you're coaching, you're teaching. That's what you're doing. You're teaching something. But there's a power position. It's about you providing information, providing technique, providing capability, right? The difference between capability and capacity. Capability is the ability to solve a known problem. Capacity is the ability to solve the unknown. So if you focus on coaching, you're worried about transferring capabilities. I know this, now you know this. I know this, now you know this. The difference is leaders develop capacity, right? Leaders develop ability to deal with the unknown. That's more about facilitating. That's more about helping a person find their own answer, much like you did with me, right? Like, okay, let's try it your way. Okay, let's try it my way. Or let's try it the way we talked about. Or what's another way we could do it? And, you know, I tell this story. I was working with a professional football team, and it was a wide out. I was working with the wide out coach and the receivers, and this is a very well-known receiver. And he dropped a pass, and the coach immediately, a great coach, by the way, coach immediately went up to him and said, "Hey, when you catch that ball, you got to put your hands like this, and you got to." And so he gave this whole instruction of how do you catch the ball. And so I went up to the coach afterwards, and I said, "How many balls do you think that guy's caught in his career?" he's like, oh, geez, I don't know, thousands, tens of thousands. I'm like, yeah, you know, there was high school, there was college, he's been in the league 2 years. Do you really think he doesn't know how to catch the ball? And he's like, well, no. I said, well, then you really have no idea why he didn't catch that ball.
Nice.
And so he said, okay, well, I said, why don't you ask him? The first question that a leader asks is, hey, what happened there? Now, it's funny because this receiver who subsequently got traded and subsequently got traded again. But anyway, he dropped another ball. And he went up to him. He goes, hey, what happened? And he goes, you know, coach, I was looking at the safety coming up on top, and I didn't get my eyes around fast enough. You know what? There's no coaching that has to be done there. That athlete knows exactly. You coaches complain, I don't have time, I don't have time, I don't have time. That's because you waste a bunch of time telling people things they already know.
Right.
And so now he goes, oh, you already know this. Okay, there's no coaching to be done. You found out what's wrong. He can correct it. If he goes, coach, I got no idea. Well, now you can start to figure it out together.
Right.
And I think there's a huge difference between coaching and leading, and sports coaches are finally starting to understand there is a time to coach and then there's a time to lead, and you have to know when that is.
Right. Yeah. And that resonates with a technician, trainer, coach. And to me, a coach can be a technician. He knows when to say, you know, turn your toes out,
Yep.
Change your grip, you know, get your eyes at this angle. The coach also knows to go, hey, I need you to do 10 sets of this, and I want you to build up at this percentage. And then let's take a look, at this again tomorrow. So what I've always said, and you might remember this from our SPEAR instructor course, is that the teacher imparts information, a coach inspires performance. The shift there is that the coach is only looking, and it has nothing to do with, you know, in this case here, you're talking to people that are being paid to win, a tournament at the end of the year. They're not paid to come in last. But if parents, if warrior leaders, if leaders in business really understood what it means to inspire performance, because that's all you can do. And it could be the guy in the mailroom who keeps screwing up shit. It's like, you know, he doesn't have like a upper management responsibility, but if you're his manager, how do you inspire performance? Right. And then all the way up. So this speaks, to everything. I mean, you both your books have I read a chapter this morning that is philosophical enough that anyone reading it, a mother or father who's in a CEO position, could go, oh shit, you know, I could do better as a parent here. Or, you know, so it's written in a way that it can talk to us personally, but also professionally. But both your books have a lot to do with mindset, capacity, and resiliency. Why don't you just share a little bit with the listeners, your rationale for that?
I want to hit something that certainly, and I credit you in the first book. So the first book, The Light in the Darkness, Leadership Development in the Unknown, it's really a discussion about how do we build that capacity, that ability to solve for the unknown in our people. And the education system is not set up to do that. Most training isn't set up to do that. We're not wired that way. We are wired that way. We're wired to try to build capacity in people, but we have been indoctrinated into very antiquated systems. And, you know, like any antiquated systems, you know, just like you said, professors don't really want to talk to you. Professors don't want to talk to me either, because I'm not a PhD. I can't look at my stuff comes from the stuff that I've learned, not from reading somebody else's stuff.
Right.
And so what we have to do is change that to the capacity. But something that's really important that's in the first book, and I think it's certainly got your fingerprint all over it, is I talk about inspirational leadership, because there's a difference between motivation and inspiration. That's actually, it's touched on in the first book. It's really discussed in the second book. But, you know, the way I look at it, the difference is I can't do inspiration in a negative way. I can motivate in a negative way. Do this and you're cut. Do this and you're fired. Do this and I'm going to cut your pay, right? I can't inspire in a negative way. But then when we talk about, well, I need you to inspire people, people are like, well, how do I inspire? And they think it's, well, it's lead by example. But I talk about, well, leading by example is not really a thing. And I, there's no answer. So what I did was I created kind of this formula, and I said, if the goal of leadership, the end goal of leadership is action. I want people to think a certain way, do a certain thing. I need them to do something. There's an action involved. If I think of all the things I've done, I haven't done them for one reason. I haven't done them because of fear. So now leaders tend to focus on the action they want to accomplish. They don't focus on the fear that exists in their people. So now I transition them and I say, okay, now I want you to and do is eliminate fear from your people. Keeping in mind, you can't totally eliminate it. Go ahead.
No. We just, every time you're about to hit a crescendo, the internet cut there. Can you go back like 1 minute? You're just saying, what the you're saying what the leader wants them to take an action, but they're not doing it because he's not recognizing the fear that they have.
Right. So the leader gets focused on the action, on whatever has to be accomplished, getting to the bottom line, winning the game, etc. And they don't focus on the fear that exists from preventing their people from doing that action. So now we have to say, okay, leader, I need you to reduce or eliminate the fear, knowing that you can't completely eliminate it. And then I throw another one at them and I say, oh, by the way, good leaders don't destroy things, they create things. Right? So I don't want you to focus on destroying fear. I want you to worry about creating courage. So now we look at, okay, so courage has to overcome the fear. So now I'm trying to tell people, okay, so how do you create courage in your people? And I believe that it's really simple. I think that you create courage by creating hope in people, hope in that what you're asking them to do is worth doing. It's something that they can do, and trust that they have the skills, that you've transferred the skills that they need, or they have them innately, and that you're going to back them. You're going to give them the support that they need. And I believe that hope and trust is inspirational leadership. And imagine if we had leaders focused on providing hope and trust instead of that bottom line. And what we need to do is, because I do believe that fear prevents us from doing everything. And the new book is really, Meditations of an Army Ranger, a Warrior Philosophy for Everyone, is really where Alice and I tried to, we have a society right now that's full of outrage and frustration and awareness, right? We'll wear a pin, we'll go on a march, we'll do a whole bunch of awareness things, but we don't have a society of action. And what prevents us from taking those actions, I don't believe is laziness. I believe it's fear. And so we have to start having those inspirational leaders like we've had with guys like John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Ronald Reagan, those people that create hope and trust in people, and start moving towards action instead of just awareness, frustration, and anger.
I dig it. It's funny that you just talked about that, because I can't flip on my other computer here, but the chapter you sent me, that was the exact, I highlighted because I wanted to talk. Your exact lines here in this advanced draft are, anytime we think of the future and anticipate another day, we are hoping. And anytime we are acting on faith in another human being, giving them our confidence or earning theirs, we are trusting. When hope and trust die, all that is human in us cannot survive. But it's funny that that's exactly the thing that I bolded and highlighted from the stuff that you sent me. I agree, obviously. We've known each other, over a decade and a half now. I always, and anyone listening to this show, ironically called No Fear, KNOW, knows that I tell people all the time, it's like right on our website, right? Fear throttles everything we do. Who we marry, where we live, how much money we make, how much weight we lift, and whether or not we defend ourselves. And that if we taught people how to look at fear differently, change their relationship with fear, as kids, how would that person evolve into an adult? What choices would they make? And I've talked about this a couple of times on shows, but the motivational or inspirational thinker and author Wayne Dwyer. Is it Dwyer or Dyer?
I thought it was Blauer.
I gotta Google that because I keep on because I got a friend with nearly the same name and it screws me up. But it's Dwyer, I think. But he asked 3 questions once in a talk that I was listening to that blew my mind. He said, if you didn't know what your job was and you looked at all the jobs in the world, which job would you want to do and why aren't you doing that? If you didn't know where you lived and you looked at all the places in the world that you could possibly live, where would you live? And, why aren't you living there? And the last one, which blew my mind, is if you didn't know how old you were and you looked in the mirror, how old would you think you were? And I remember I read that in the 80s and I talk about it all the time. It's Dyer, Wayne Dyer. Yeah. And so, like that stuff, when you peel that onion, all of that is about fear. Everything. And, I've been, passionately advocating for this, forever. And I'm glad to hear that's the theme of the next book and the underlying mission of that. At the end of the day, even the leader you're consulting with who is worried about changing, his protocol because he goes, look, I've been winning for these many seasons. Like, I'm not about to go touchy feely and I can't do that. Like that's his own fear, right? At an unconscious level, he's worried that if he changes, it's funny. I went to a few years ago. Life was getting really crazy, and I decided to go to this retreat where you had to turn in your phone. And I think I spoke to you at the time, or I don't remember, maybe not. But I told a bunch of people, hey, I'm going to be offline for like 9 days with no phone. I'm going to this meditation, introspection, like spiritual retreat. And a lot of people just started laughing, JC, right? Because they're just so used to me on the phone all the time, right? And, I did the thing. I had zero problem turning it in, zero problem being away from it. In fact, I didn't turn it on until 2 or 3 days after I had finished, wasn't even interested. But I will tell you this, here I am. This was an expensive thing. I was away from the family, no phone contact, no nothing. And my fear, and I've been studying fear for decades and without patting myself on the back, know a lot more about the tricks and traps of self-awareness and fear, and that most people don't want to fucking hear what you see in them or in the process. And that's because of their own fear. And how do you even with total love say to somebody, I know you're scared, fuck off, I'm not scared. But here was my biggest fear. When I went in there, the conversations I had with myself is, if I eliminate some of my anger and intensity, is that going to impact how effectively I teach self-defense, how effectively and it was weird. That was like a recurring thing. So even when the singular goal, like a sniper, was I'm going to this thing to fucking develop greater self-awareness, I still had a fear that getting more grounded, more self-awareness, less anger, less frustration was going to impact my creativity in the area that I so love, which I found that like duplicitous of the ego, right? And it was like, you understand where I'm coming from? Is like, I would rather hang on to being angry and creative than to just be more spiritual and fucking relaxed and chill, and a better husband or better parent or just a better human. So at the end of the day, and I just say this, and again, we didn't know any idea what we were going to talk about. I just say this, that I've spent 3-4 decades studying fear, and that doesn't mean that I get a pass on my own fears. And I'm sharing this vulnerable, intimate thing with everybody here, because I want you to understand that if you look in the mirror, you look at someone, you go, no, I'm cool with that, I'm not afraid. What you're either lying or you're really caught up in semantics. You've heard the story.
Yeah, or you're crazy.
Yeah, or you're crazy. But we can't fix crazy. But if people develop greater self-awareness and just said, I will, if I have greater self-awareness, I will get closer to understanding fear. And the reframe that I make, that of course well, is there's no such a state or place as actual no fear, no fear.
Right.
But what there is changing your relationship with fear. And the only way to do that is to say, I want to get to know fear, KNOW. And it's not to invite it in, but to, when you recognize the fear, one of the quotes that I throw around a lot is, if you didn't fear, what would you do? You'd have caught that ball. You'd have walked up to your employees who are afraid of getting fired because fucking numbers are down, and said, hey, what's really going on?
I think, I think it is, there's this balance piece of that society's got to understand. And I think that the fear stuff, so I believe that fear is a constant, right? In fact, even in my little equation, I put the constant symbol in front of fear, because I don't think it disappears ever. I think it's always there. I think it's understanding what you're afraid of and having a plan to kind of, be able to conquer that fear at that time, but knowing that, okay, fear doesn't go away. And one of the reasons I think that I've been successful with professional athletes is, so they see a big Army Ranger who says, yeah, I was afraid. And not only was I afraid then, but I'm afraid now. I attempted suicide 4 times. I'm afraid that that'll happen again. Fear's real. One of the things that I talk to people about is, because I get a whole lot of comparative analysis, right? Of, well, your fear choices were life or death. That's something to be afraid of. And I always go, okay, so if I was afraid of spiders and you were afraid of snakes, would it be fair for me to go, well, my fear of spiders is way more, serious than your fear of snakes? That's ludicrous, right? Fear is real. So my 14-year-old son, fear of not making a team, that's real. That's a real thing that he's experiencing. And as a parent, if I don't sit there, if I go, oh, geez, you're gonna have real stuff to worry about, right? If I don't accept that that's real, and this is the dichotomy of society right now, we feel that there's 2 options. We either minimize their fear and go, that's nothing to worry about. Let me tell you what you're really worried about. Or we want to eliminate that fear from them so everybody makes the team. As opposed to, okay, let's talk about this fear. Let's talk about, and look, I'll brag on my son a little bit, and I think this works. My youngest son, so as you know, I have Casey, who's 21. She's about to graduate college. He's an NCAA athlete. I have Corbett, who just started his freshman year. He's an NCAA athlete. And I have my 14-year-old son, Steve. And Steve's a big guy. Steve is a football player and a lacrosse player, and he is great at both of those things. And he decided that he wanted to play basketball. And, Steve is not the traditionally built guy for basketball. But he practiced hard and he worked at it. And I said, yeah, you should try out. So it's 3 days of tryouts. And he tries out. And the first day of tryouts, he gets cut. And he was really disappointed. And so, anybody who's been cut knows it sucks. It's horrible to get cut from things. And, we talked about it. And he seemed like he was in a pretty good place. An email comes out that night from the coach that says, hey, we made a mistake. We weren't supposed to do any cuts the first day. We're not doing cuts till the 3rd day. So if you were cut,
Wow.
you can come back. Now, not what I would have done at all, but
Right.
okay. And Steve, I was away, and Steve calls me up and he goes, I'm going to try it again. Now, odds are you're cut the first day, you're probably going to get cut the third day. Like, this is a kid who knew that he could be cut again. And he goes, no, if I get cut, I'm still going to be better for having gone those additional 2 days. So I'm going to keep going.
Nice.
And he did. And he made the team. He ended up making the team. He had a whole bunch of friends who didn't make the team. And there were a whole bunch of parents who complained. They complained that they were cuts the first day. They complained that their kid was cut twice. Look, what for me, what that was, is it was an opportunity to practice resiliency.
Mm-hmm.
Because resiliency is how do you deal with failure and your fear of failure. And we have to start developing that. And it doesn't develop by eliminating it. And it doesn't develop by saying it doesn't count. Like, oh, well, don't worry about that. That's not big. Oh, you don't have a date to prom? Yeah, there's bigger things to worry about in life. That comparative analysis thing. So I think that, we've got to look at fear, and I don't want to destroy fear. What I want to do is I want to create things that are greater than fear in people. And the only way to create things greater than fear is to really look at fear, see what it is, so that we can build something that's better than it.
Yeah, well, two things. One is your son's choices, and the fact that you were away and that he made the team is as much a testimony to his resilience as it is to your parenting and your leadership at home, and proof that it works. So congrats on that, because there are, you think about that, and like some coaches listening here might go, I'm going to cut people on the first day and then invite them back, because that's a way to test resiliency and attitude, right? Who comes back? And I've seen that in some other organizations that I'm close to, where they play the mind game because they know there's going to be some pressure, and they want to see who flips out, who's the trophy, hunter, who goes, wait a minute, I want a first place trophy for second place too, and in some areas you can't have that. So that's a great story and a great example that your shit works, and people just need to listen. The other thing on fear, and here's a little reframe for you and for the listeners, is that, everything's holistic, the physiology, the physics, the psychology. We're interdependent of all facets, the mind, the body, the spirit, all that. We're not going to get all woo-woo and everything here. But the reality is, I remember going down to brag. I'm going to brag about going to brag. I went, and I got in a couple of days early, and a bunch of people have heard this story before. And I'm meeting at a coffee shop, and a couple of the guys that I'm going to be training that week are going to go jumping Saturday afternoon, skydiving. And they ask me, hey, you want to come skydiving? And I go, no, I'm good. And they go, why, are you scared? I go, yeah. And they go, and they laugh, and they go, like, I thought you're the fear management guy. And I said, yeah, I am managing my fear by not jumping out of an airplane. So they all laugh, but I can see, that they looked at me. I go, listen, I've done it twice. I'm really afraid of heights, and I did it twice. I did it after the first Point Break movie, because I said, holy shit, if that's what skydiving looks like, I got to do that. And then forgot on my way to the jump zone, forgot that I'm terrified of heights, but I went anyhow, because I went like, I'm just going to manage my fear and do this. It doesn't mean, and I couldn't believe I did it. It was a static line jump, and people asked me how it was, and I joked. I went, I think I passed out before this chute deployed. Just fear. I just passed out. So I don't remember it. I got to go again. My second jump was a tandem jump at 10,000 feet. And I went alone, and nobody knew I was going, and I just went and did it for myself. And it was amazing. But then I went, like, I know I can do it. I didn't even have a chute there. The guy, I was strapped to a guy that had a chute, right? So, I remember sitting in the airplane, JC, with him, and I looked at him, and he said, I said, hey, how you doing? He goes, good. How are you? I said, good. I said, do you have any like personal issues? How are things with your wife, your girlfriend, your family? And he looks at me and he smiles. He goes, like, everything's good. You know, my narcolepsy's under control with the new meds. And I was like, oh, fuck, like the jump master from hell, right? You know, he's just making these jokes. And I remember when I clipped in and I'm facing the door and they open the door, I remember actually leaning forward because I wanted to hear the D rings clink, knowing, well, just in case he pretended to hook me in, and then I would jump without a chute, right? Just all these crazy thoughts are going through my head. Anyways, the point about this, like I said, I did this as a fear management exercise to see if the advice I was giving people actually worked. Because here I am afraid of heights. I'm going to go do this because I could rationalize my way out of it. And even just looking at the contract, the waiver they make you sign, it would scare the shit out of most people, which is the intention. And so here I am. I'm sitting at Fort Bragg in a coffee shop, and the guy says, "You want to go jumping?" I said, "No, I'm good." He said, "Were you afraid?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I thought you're a fear management expert." I make the joke, "I'm managing my fear." He laughs. I go, "So you're not afraid of skydiving?" He says, "Fuck no, I love it. I go anytime I can. I've got like 600-700 jumps." And I said, "So no fear?" He goes, "No." I said, "Then let me pack your fucking chute for you." And he looks at me and he goes, "Fuck you." And I look at him and I go, "Fear." Right? And so what had happened is that I can introduce a new stimulus into a routine that you have. And this is an important thing. You said something earlier that you believe fear is always there. And I can imagine a lot of people, whether it's a musician, a guitarist, a cop, another soldier, listening to this going, "Well, that's bullshit. I don't know if you want to do this." And what it is we get stress inoculated enough that we don't define the anxiousness or the adrenaline or the anticipation as fear in the same way. And this is an important part of the nomenclature in helping society redefine this, because fear has a noxious, derogatory connotation. But what if we got to the point in 10 years from now when people are going, "Man, I hope I feel some fear because I can't sing my best or I can't play my best if I don't have fear." And there's a lot of research around that if you don't have a measure, a level of performance anxiety, then that event has lost its meaning to you. Mm-hmm. You're not going to flow. You're not going to get in the zone. And that's the thing is, like, if you talk to somebody who's like a zone flow proponent, they'll go, "No, there's no fear in here." And I go, "Well, no, it's a singular focus on your task. So you can't hold the fear thought in your mind. Fear is what Gavin de Becker said in his book, Gift of Fear. You feel the fear before the event. Right. That's static before.
Right. And I think, I just, in the new book, I talk about the cycle of greatness. And I was working with a running back who's in his second year has just broken the number of receptions from a running back in the NFL, right? Wow. In his second year, right? And terrific young man, intelligent, talented. I guess I can say Christian McCaffrey. And I shared with them because I came up with the cycle of greatness, because I think greatness isn't static.
Right.
Right. So this kind of fits into what you're saying, because let's look at what year were the Miami Dolphins undefeated? 70s. 78. Yeah. So that Miami Dolphins team, they were great right then and there. If we took that team today and played anybody, I don't know how good they'd do.
Right.
And because greatness can't be static. If you're great and you stay where you are, somebody's going to be greater than you. So greatness, the cycle of greatness, I basically say, look, that you only have to be great about 2% of the time. 98% of the time, you need to be in the cycle of innovating, which leads to either learning, or failure, which also leads to learning, and then back to innovating. And 98% of the time you're in this loop. And there's some times when you can be in the quote unquote flow, right? You can be focused on, I'm going to get my eyes around faster. I'm going to get my weapon up faster. I'm going to, change. I'm going to try my grip here a little bit different, right? So you can have no fear of that, in that specific, like going at it from a specific, like, I'm going to shoot with my offhand. I know that I miss with my offhand. I'm going to get to a place where I don't miss with my offhand.
Right.
And you can get to that in that flow, in that little specific situation, to get to that 2% of continuing to be great. And when we talked to him, because he said, how often do you think you got to be great? He's like, I always got to be great. I'm like, yeah, no. Now take an athlete like him, who's, I mean, and again, one of the most intelligent guys I've met, one of the nicest guys, a great leader. He thought he had to be great all the time.
A lot of pressure.
Imagine the fear that comes with the fear that comes with that thinking that you have to be great all the time, then prevents you from reaching new levels of greatness.
Right.
I always look, I had my two favorite coaches, I'm not even going to say my two favorite coaches, but one of my favorite coaches is Ron Rivera. And Ron introduced me to Andy Reid. And I spoke to him. I was a keynote at the NFL Owners and Head Coaches Conference. And Andy Reid spent like an hour with me and just talking to me. And there's a reason that Andy Reid remains relevant and continues to be great, because that guy innovates. He innovates constantly and is never afraid to try new stuff and fail. And look, again, the life of a coach at a high Division I program in the NCAA, at the professional level, the fear's real, because you get fired all the time. They get fired all the time. And it's and I feel it because I've become so close with a lot of these guys. When they're having friction with their owners, I worry. I have fear. I'm like, oh no, I can't let them be unsuccessful. I've got to help. And but to be able to get past that, to know that, okay, yes, I don't want to get fired. That's real. But I have to live with that to get my organization to where it needs to be. And I just, that's the mark of a leader. And unfortunately, and I do believe it's societal, we're creating this culture where you're right. Fear is a bad word. We can't have fear. I see it. So my son, who my oldest son, who plays on a Division I football team, I see the false bravado that lives in on that team. Right? They all have tattoos across their chest. Fear no man, and I'm gonna out tough the guy across from me, and I'm gonna be better. And this is something that I learned from you, for sure. I don't worry about what the guy across from me. I respect the guy's capabilities. I respect that he gets a vote, but I also know my capabilities. And I say it all the time. And I learned this from you. If you go into a fight with one other guy and you doubt yourself, you're outnumbered. Right. And so that false bravado, I said, I was working with a quarterback, and, I said, the guys, he would get really amped up and be jumping around and knocking chairs down. And I'm like, when you're in a bar fight and you see the guy who's yelling at you that he's going to kick your ass and starts taking off his jacket, what do you think of that guy? He's like, I don't know. I said, I'll tell you what I think of that guy. That guy's scared shitless to throw a punch. That guy does not want to fight me. That guy is stalling in every possible way to not fight me. You know who I'm looking at more? The guy who doesn't say a word, who's just staring at me, because he's trying to figure out what his best moment to hit me is. I want to fight the guy who's jumping up and down. That's who I want to fight, because he's scared and I can make him more afraid.
Crazy.
And, and it works, because if you look at, and I always brag on them, the defensive line of the Carolina Panthers, who I've worked with a lot. You watch those guys, when they make a sack, when they force an interception, when they perform their best, a lot of defensive linemen, you'll see them do some sort of silly dance or some stupid, they flex, whatever. They do nothing. They get up, they talk to each other, and they go back to doing it again, because that is what warriors do. I mean, and I always say, can you imagine me, getting ready to get back on the helicopter after hitting a target and chest bumping and doing, dancing around and having some stupid handshake? No, I just get back on the helicopter. Maybe there's a fist bump, but that's about as far as it goes. And that's That's the mindset that you have to have. I've rambled. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's fine. Listen, a lot of it was going through my head is this again element of authenticity and self-awareness, and if the guy that, and people don't even realize this, you remember when Tyson fought Holyfield and bit his ear off?
Yep.
Okay. Well, a lot of people don't realize this, that the week or the month before, I think it was just the week before, Sports Illustrated had an interview with Holyfield, and there was one small sentence in there where he talked about biting an athlete as an amateur. He got so frustrated. And so I read that and I intuit, and I don't know Tyson, but if I could peel the onion, I guarantee Tyson read that planted a seed, like as an option, a mental blueprint in his head. And then suddenly, like 2 days later during the fight, frustrated and everything, he bites, because it's so random and it doesn't even matter. But what I'm getting at in my hypothesis is that, in talent code, they talk about ignition. Something happens in somebody's life and it ignites them. And now they want to become a pro football player. They want to become a soldier. They want to be. Something happens at that moment that the brain kind of identifies with, and until that individual, can peel their own onion through self-awareness and introspection and seeking self-actualization, which is your cycle of greatness, just a different word, is because I could look at your chart, JC, and you could say, and I go, I want to take up golf and I'm going to study your, and and I will never be a great golfer. I can be the greatest golfer I can be, but,
right.
and that's that reframe.
Yep.
And so it's interesting. And I remember, because I've worked with a bunch of fighters over the years, and I'm like you, where I go man, fucking be a professional. I want you to be cool here. And what I realized a long time ago, and I've talked about this story, but it's relevant here, interviewing Maurice Smith, who won a UFC, was a K1 fighter, one of the best fighters in the world in his time. And I had worked with him one-on-one, where he had just come off a loss in Japan, and I was up in his hotel room. He had 101 fever, and he had to fight, and it was the first televised event. It was Benny Urquidez, his retirement fight, and he was on the card. And the manager of the Dale Floyd comes up to me and he says, "Hey, you're the Anthony Robbins of the self-defense world." And I went, "Okay." And he says, "Would you work with Maurice? He can't lose this fight. And he's sick, and he just came off a loss. His head, as you can see, I'd never seen him like this." So I go up there and I'm talking to him, and he's not even making eye contact. He's sitting on his bed. I'm in the other bed. And I go, "Look, man, I'm just trying to help out here. Dale asked me to come up and talk." And what I was doing is intuitively doing everything that you're talking about. Is, how do I have this guy believe in himself, where what he's really thinking about is, I'm going to look bad in front of my family and friends. I'm going to lose my sponsorship. I'm going to lose my second fight. I'm on American TV for the first time. Well, this is my business. And maybe he's not even thinking about all those things, but those are the things that have to run through your thought when you're meditating. You got all these random thoughts. And I'm sitting there, and I'm trying to, me, I got a lot of tools in my toolbox, and I'm trying to get any angle, the 3 Ps, what'll cost you if you don't fight back, all these things. And then, he's just looking at me, and he kind of looks over at the clock, and I realize that I'm bombing. It's like 30 minutes into this talk, and he's like going, "How much longer are you going to be here?" And I say to him, I go, "Hey man, you got any kids?" And I forget what he said, but he had kids. I said, you know who Marvin Hagler is, right? And he goes, nods. He goes, "Yeah." I go, "You ever hear the story about Hagler and why he fought so hard for so many years?" And he goes, no. He goes, he was interviewed once, and it was amazing. I just want to share with you, and then I'm going to leave. So he's like, okay. He said, I said to him, he was a southpaw. Nobody wanted to fight him. And for years, he ate like canned food. Couldn't afford, and he had a kid that he had to feed, and like they just eat peanut butter sandwiches and cans of peas and shit. And he told the story after Tony Simpson put his hand on Hagler's shoulder at a press conference to take a picture, like they were together, and he puts his hand on his shoulder, and Hagler turns to him and says, "Get your hand off my shoulder now, or I'll knock you out here. I won't even wait for the fight." And Simpson like takes his hand off, like as if he just touched like an electric shock, as like the hand came off. And when I watched that, I went, that was the fight right there, right? And he goes out and he destroys him, but he gets asked, "What are you thinking?" And he said, "The other guy is fighting me for my belt. I am fighting to put food on my kid's plate."
Yeah.
And the value here for people listening and the connection, is this, the meaningfulness you put behind whatever you're doing. And I told that story to Maurice. And when I got to the part where I said he's fighting to put food on the kid's plate, I said, "Look, man, I've pulled a rabbit out of a hat. I tried to juggle for you. I showed you some card tricks. Nothing's working. You need to fight tonight. You're sick. You're coming off a loss. I want you to go out there, and all I want you to think about is that Hagler story as you're walking in there, that this isn't about the show anymore. This is about putting food on your kid's plate." And, that was the first time he looked up and just looked at me. And I knew I got in his head. And here's the thing, like as a coach, I wasn't in his corner. I didn't take any part in any victory celebration or anything like that, because like the athletes you work with and the athletes I've worked with and stuff like that, they got it there through their own intensity, where your coaching and mindset comes in, and where stuff like this comes in, is we all have a moment where we get a fear spike, and we don't necessarily know why, because we think we're invincible at times. We get that fear spike, but most of us don't have permission and tools at that moment to realize we need to be our own coach. Right. And how do we, like it's your book and your teaching. And then of course, some of my shit where someone goes, "Fuck, I'm alone right now, but I know how to coach myself. What I need is courage right now. What I need is to use my fear." And so I'm going to, throw this in here. I've been playing with this and I haven't finessed it, but, or I always say fear can stymie, right, and hold us down. But if we reframe it and recognize that it's part of our whole meta system, and that fear is now a fuel, and the reframe is the fuel to supercharge anything I need to do. Just to reframe that if I get a fear spike, that if I think about that properly, that was my first radar blip that said, this is outside your comfort zone, but whatever caused that is still there, and you need to go through that.
So I think I've been talking with a lot of athletes about this as well, and it's something that I really saw from a mutual friend of ours, who is a shooting instructor, who is a former Delta guy, and you'll know who it is as soon as I say what I read. Something he said. This idea of mindset is too much, warrior mindset, whatever mindset. He felt his words were, it's too like till Valhalla. It's too romanticized, and it's not easy to do, right? Like, oh, change your mindset. We hear that all the time. Oh, you just got to change your mind. That's really, it's bullshit, right? It's about, he coined the term mental preparation. I'm sure he didn't coin it, but that's how he used it. He said mental preparation. And to me, I think it's mental training. right? We train on our weapon system. We train our body. Why are we not training our mind? And why are we not thinking about how we see these things and looking at it? And again, identifying it, defining it, and then being able to say, okay, well, these are the tools that I need to get past this obstacle. And I think the more that we take that seriously, like somebody, I was doing an interview for a contract. And they said, well, we're looking for a mental performance coach. And I'm like, well, that's not what I am. I am an advisor. Your success is on you. I'm going to try to facilitate your understanding of what drives you, what fears you have, what you can do, better. I try to stay away from the tactical stuff. I try to stay a little bit more, thoughtful and getting to know people. And I said, I can't change somebody's mindset. It's not a switch. What we've got to do is we've got to continue to train the tasks that we're asking them to do. And the way we do that is, I ask coaches all the time, how often do you set up drills where they will definitely fail? Where they will not, no matter what they do, it's almost an impossible task. Like, we don't do that. Yeah. Well, how many in a game, I can promise you that they're going to be faced with more challenges where they don't know the answer than they know the answer. So start up to fail. And that's how you build resiliency. And that's how you learn to, maybe the fear doesn't disappear, but it does reframe to the fuel, because I've seen something like this before and I know I can handle this.
Right. Do you on that, you like the idea of setting up drills that are impossible to, yeah. Okay. Is there a sliver of a chance someone could pull it off, or there's absolutely no solution?
So what I would say is there is a chance that they could pull it off, but it is set up in a way that they haven't been prepared for the drill.
Right.
They haven't maybe even been instructed on, hey, these are some techniques that you could do to solve it. But I will focus on something that I know that they can. Like, let's say in a lacrosse, I'll say, I really want you to work on your dodge and your speed. So that's a quantifiable thing that I can help and say, hey, that was good, or that was, but there's a part of the drill that I just don't want them to get. Right. Because I want them to feel that frustration. I want them to feel that, how do they react when I cannot get past this guy? Okay, great. Now let's talk about that.
Right. You're triggering a conversation. You're setting up the need for the conversation. Okay.
I don't want them to practice failure. I want them to understand, when faced with an obstacle, what does that look like? When I fail one time, because now we can come back and say, all right, now let's talk about this. Right. And now let's try it again.
Yeah. I just want to clarify that for people, because it could have been misinterpreted as, you gave somebody a Rubik's Cube that was tampered with, and now they end up hanging themselves,
And the other piece of that, though, I think that's really important, is I will tell guys, and I believe in transparency. I do not believe in secret stuff. I'm not a big fan of a lot of mind games.
Agreed.
I'm going to tell them at the beginning of the drill, this drill is designed for you not to succeed.
Right.
So try. If you don't, you're not a dumbass. This is intentionally. And sometimes I'll tell them right after the drill, like, hey guys, that was done. I didn't want you to score. I wanted you to do this. Right. And I think that we have to be very transparent. But one of the things, it's an easy thing for coaches to do. And the military was death on this, and the best units I was in didn't do this, but they have a schedule, like a practice schedule, right? Here's what we're going to do today. Well, I can prepare now. There's no unknown. I can prepare for everything I'm going to tell coaches. Don't push your practice. I want them to go into practice and go 100% throughout the entire practice, because they should know what's coming next. Because in a game, you don't know what's coming next.
Right.
In combat, you don't know what's coming. In life, you don't know what's coming next.
Right.
And we propagate a lot of the fear that people, because we've never prepared them to deal with the unknown. We continue to set people up. We want to make things, we say we're making it hard, but we're really making it easy. Oh, today's going to be a really hard practice. Here it is. Okay, you just told me. Well, it's now less hard because I'm prepared. I'm mentally prepared.
Right. I dig it. Now, and that obviously resonates with a lot of our training methodology with, our whole Jack in the Box principles and the whole startle flinch and that we don't confuse technical with tactical. It's the tactical mindset of I've got to figure something out. I've got to figure out a solution, and none of that happens if you don't know how to manage your fear. Did I ever tell you my play on words for seminar asking people, hey, what the opposite of courage is?
No, what?
Does that ring a bell? So I'll be talking to people, and it's something just because of your chapter, maybe something you can work into your presentations, because I think it's the light bulb moment it triggers. The epiphany is massive. As I always say, the mind navigates the body, and in the article, you've read my article, Warrior's Personal Kill Zone, and then the law enforcement version, Presumed Compliance. I talk about how you feel affects how you think, and how you think affects how you feel. Both influence how you move. And so, I'll be talking when I'm doing the whole cycle of behavior and the fear loop and getting people, dialed into that. And I'll say, hey, I'm going to write a word on the board. And as soon as I reveal the word, I want somebody just to call out the opposite right away. Just call it out, blurt it out. And I write down the word courage. And then I remind them, they don't see it yet, I'm blocking the word courage. And I go, I'm going to show you a word now. And I just want you to, what is the opposite of this? Somebody blurt this out. And I'll step away and I expose the word courage. And there's always somebody in the group that yells out cowardice as the opposite. People yell out fear. I go, no, fear is an emotion. Courage it's not an emotion. Like it's a noun. It's something different. But someone always gets courage. Someone always yells out cowardice. And I want everyone listening to this to kind of, if you're driving, don't lean in and listen. Just keep looking at the road so you don't fucking hit another car. But listen to this reframe. There are very few true cowards in the world. Treasonous people. There's some people who you would look at their behavior as cowardly. Oh, you broke up by text. What the fuck was that? That's pussy, right? That's coward. But in the true definition, there's very few real cowards in the world. What happens is we get fucking scared. It's fear again. And so the opposite of courage isn't cowardice. The opposite of courage, and then I turn around, JC, and I block the word and I write the letters DIS hyphen. DIS hyphen. The opposite of courage is discouraged. It's when you visualize, and this ties back to the acronym that I use all the time of false expectations appearing real. It's when we know what we should do. I should get up now and shake that person's hand. I should catch the ball. I should ask this person to marry me. I should ask this person to get a divorce. I should tell my partner I want to sell the business and move on. I should change my career. I should, but we visualize what we want to do. And then our fear starts running another movie where instead of me being the hero in my movie, I'm a fucking extra, right? And I'm now manipulated by my fears. But what I'm doing as the longer I play that movie is I'm discouraging myself from right action. And so it's so profound, like in the context, if you can feel that, is that
I love it. I absolutely love it.
So anyways, I want to share that with you because I think you'll be able to use that in when you're doing your courage talks.
I love that because, and I love that because you and I both know in our kind of shared world, there's a bunch of guys with similar backgrounds to me who do this. Motivational speakers. They do a lot of motivation stuff. One comes to mind who is, he and I were both listed on, somebody just came out with a veteran author, distinguished veteran authors. And he and I were both on the list. And I laughed because he's so different, because I think we have this understanding that there is this idea of, if you're not courageous, you are a coward. If you're not good, you're bad. If you're not right, there are these absolute binary it's that simple. And you said something the other day about how guys might be afraid of being touchy-feely. And what I tell leaders is, I understand that you see a guy in front of you who's been fortunate enough to serve in combat a number of times, and 6'3", 225 pounds, and I'm talking to you and you think it's touchy-feely, but I'm talking about people. And people are complex organisms, right? There's the brain, there's the mind, there's the physiology, there's the psychology, there's all this stuff, and none of them are the same. Anything that tries to box you is wrong.
Right.
So you can sit there and say it's touchy-feely, but hey, we're people, and people are kind of touchy-feely. I don't care. The hardest person listening to you right now has some hopes that mean a lot to them. And there's something that affects who they are, unless they have some sort of psychosis, right? So I love this idea because people, a lot of times, I think people are afraid of being a coward, and then they think they're bad, as opposed to no, because bad is finite, right? If I'm bad, you're bad. You're the opposite of good, as opposed to you're at a place right now that I can do better. But accepting, we talk a lot about, there's a chapter on resiliency. And, there's this big thing that, the military likes to say, and I'm sure you've heard it a whole bunch of times in your career, embrace the suck. Well, the ancient Greeks used to call it love your fate, right? Amor fati, or fatai, and it's love your fate. Embracing the suck is about accepting where you are, and then you have two choices. You can be complacent and just stay there, or you can have a plan of action to move forward. I think a lot of times we don't love our fate, or we accept where we are and we just stay there and we complain about it. So we don't really embrace the suck. We don't love our fate. We just accept our fate. And that's kind of where we are now. And one of the struggles that I have with, whether it's, and let me say something that might be very controversial to some of your listeners. Right. I get to work and interact with one of the guys who is the second guy to kneel in the NFL. And I've written a couple of articles about kneeling, but here's what I'm going to tell you. Anybody who's ever read Thoreau, and we look at Thoreau as one of the great minds of our time. And here's a guy who wouldn't pay his taxes because he wasn't going to support a government that he thought allowed slavery, right? He said, slavery's wrong. I'm not going to pay my taxes. Went to jail, was pissed off because somebody else paid his taxes for him to get him out of jail. And we look at civil disobedience as one of the great things about what our nation allows is this idea of standing up for what's right. We've done it as a nation a number of times, sometimes, not out of pureness, but let's hope that there's some pure intent. I look at this individual who still kneels. He's one of like 4 guys in the NFL who kneels. He's doing exactly look at the courage that guy has. And we can sit there and say, oh, he's disrespectful. He's not. He's got a family that, you know, his mother was military, his brother is military, his uncles are military. He's not disrespecting the military. He's not even disrespecting the country. He's taking this idea, this fear that I think is bred like, oh, I can't look bad. I can't do something that's different. I can't stand up for something. There's an action. All right. Now, what I would like him to do is take it farther. I'd like him to do more. Now, he does a lot on his own, but I'd like him to energize other people and explain himself a little bit like Thoreau did. And I think that would go a long way. But we have to, as a nation, stop complaining and waiting for somebody else to solve our problems, and start solving them ourselves in thoughtful, meaningful ways.
Kind of heavy.
Yeah, well, you know, and again, I always say, and I've talked to him, and I've said, look, I wouldn't kneel. That's not what I'm energized to do. I don't mind that he kneels. I don't think he's just his relationship with a symbol of the nation is as personal to him as his relationship to a higher being is. And I'm not going to say he can or can't do it. You know, we can argue about, hey, if you're working, whatever. That's all semantics, and I'm cool with that. But if we really understand the courage that it takes to do what he does, and then pushing him to have more courage to do more, you know, I think that's really, really important. And I think that if we stood up, and it doesn't have to be big things, right? It doesn't have to be something like that. It can be little things, but we're so afraid to stand up and really be vulnerable and say, I think it's this way. And be open to other people saying, well, what about this, this, and this? And being able to kind of, you know, I don't think it means ideas. I mean, the first thing that we talked about, I don't think that I'm, you know, easily influenced because I listen to you and realize, oh, this works better than not taking your firing hand off, right? I don't think I'm like a soft-minded guy. I think I saw something and I had a growth mindset that said, yep, this works better. I think that we get so, you know, we're just afraid. We're just afraid. And really what the second book is really trying to do is let's be thoughtful, but then let's act. You know, let's act where, you know, when the NFL has a problem with some sexual assault and sexual harassment, and I was fortunate enough to talk to some folks in the NFL, and I said, I'm not surprised. If you treat your people, your center of gravity, which is the players, like they're things, like they're products, then my guess is the mindset that all people are things and they're products, and we can treat them however. And then you have people who are afraid to say, hey, that's wrong, don't do that. And that's really, you want to push the Me Too movement further. It's not about Me Too. It's about, hey, stop, don't do that.
Right.
You know, and being able to be that person who stands up in the moment and says, that's not okay.
This all ties back to self-awareness and fear, because, you know, all of it and the, you know, from the owners to the people to the individual, but we'll end up going on 5 hours of you know, the reality of it all for everybody, you know, listening to this is, you know, all of us face confrontations in our life, and how we handle that confrontation is going to determine the quality of our day, the week, and the entire life. That is a continually evolving process. Kind of, you know, what you would talk about, the cycle of greatness, which will probably throw a lot of people off, just the name of it, if you're not talking to like a professional, because a lot of people, I think, are uncomfortable with thinking that they're great. And I think what you're talking about is spiritually and holistically, you know, how great can you be as a parent, as a taxi driver, as a ball player, as whatever.
And just so you know, and so your listeners know, the chapter before the cycle of greatness is a chapter called greatness,
right.
And it's about defining your own greatness.
Right. It frames that good. Yeah.
And you have to determine. I'm a big believer in. I think you can work towards whatever greatness you want, and I don't think anything. I am a tortured optimist. But I think once you figure out, because what I say is greatness for whatever you want to do, whether it's be the best football player or be the best parent or be the best fighter, it requires a singularity of focus that most people are afraid to take.
Mm-hmm.
And if you truly want to be great, look, I was very fortunate. I could be, and I don't think I was a great fighter. I think I was in the presence of great fighters. And I was afforded the opportunity to have that singularity of focus on what I was doing. My marriage suffered because of it. I'm sure my children suffered because of it. I mean, how they turned out well because their mother was an incredible person to raise them. But we have to understand that we make choices, and if your desire is to be the best parent, well, just have a singularity of focus, knowing that means you may not be the best business person, or you may not be the best athlete, but you can be. But otherwise, like, I don't know that I'm great at anything. I think I'm really good at some stuff. Would I like to be better at some things? Yeah. And do I shift my focus? Yeah. But I do. I think that it's important that we identify, what do we want to be great at, and do we want to be great at anything? There's this idea that you have to be great at something. No, you don't. You have to be great with where you are.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot, there's, so much info out there and so much work and talks and podcasts about all this sort of stuff that it's like being in front of a Gatling gun of self-help bullets, and things are just hitting you like, what should I do? And at the end of the day, where I have found, whatever we would define as inner peace is, and I don't say that I have it or found it, but I have moments where I'm sitting there really enjoying a book or a cup of coffee or nature or a talk or watching my kids or watching a dog, and I go, oh, look at this. And this is like that meditative state where you're just hearing that, what the Zen warriors would talk about, like the now, right? The samurai, just be here now, no past, no future. And so what I kind of want to, I'm going to wrap this up with this, and then you can kind of put a bow on top of it, is understanding courage, understanding fear is about getting to know yourself and self-awareness. And that's what you want to be great at, is you want to be great at evolving yourself so that you're transparent and authentic. And ultimately what that will lead to is that moment where you go, this is where I want to live. This is what I want to do. And when I look in the mirror, I have no idea how old I am, because I'm fucking happy inside. So I look a little bit younger than somebody who's fucking living a lie.
I think that's it. And this book, the second book, I'm really excited about, because I think it combines, I spend a lot of time reading stuff that no one really cares about, which is either it's brain science or it's philosophy. And the philosophy that I've gone towards is really the ancients and Buddhism and, the five rings, and really that kind of Zen idea. And really, we are what I talk about in the final chapter, which is living a life of purpose, which is really the goal for all of us, right? To live a life of purpose. And I say you're bombarded by this idea. One of the guys I was talking about earlier, he takes a picture of his watch every day at 4:30 in the morning when he gets up, and get up and grind and attack the day. We've got that on one side. And then on the other side, we've got, oh, take a break, find your passion, love what you do, da, da, da. And we've got these two competing things, and whichever side you're on, you almost, hey, don't work too hard, spend some time with your family. We don't know us, right? Because I've got clients that they feel horrible when they're just like spending time on themselves. They like the journey for them is their piece, right? They like that, thinking about stuff. And so what I really want people to do is stop feeling bad about who they are and just start looking at who they are. And if they want to improve it, you said something about, being defined. Our action doesn't define us forever. Our actions define us at a point in time. And that doesn't mean you have to stay there. And I think that it's really important that we can look at it and we can say, okay, here's what we can learn. And I don't like that decision, or I don't like who I was in that. And here's my plan to change that.
Right.
Because all the other stuff is just noise. It's a Gatling gun of, either work harder or don't work too hard, as opposed to be you.
Yeah. And I think both sides are, anybody online, including us, is consciously or unconsciously selling an idea. Some people are manipulative at it because it's just an ROI, their return on investment. And some people are genuinely trying to help people. But, we're pushing an idea. And I think both those extremes are in some way the same as that talk I had with that guy, that operator down at Fort Bragg, who was making fun of me because I didn't want to jump out of an airplane. That at the end of the day, it's semantics. And you will push and share what you believe in at the time. And when we uncover that somebody was, manipulative and deceptive, and very often people get exposed not fast enough, you find out. But I think that there's a balance. Like this morning, my schedule has been totally interrupted by the holidays and company and it's really, I'd really created a rhythm about a month ago. So this morning I woke up early, but I feel like shit because I've been going to bed early. And I'm lying there and I'm thinking about that individual that you mentioned. And I'm thinking about it. It was very funny that you were closing with that, because I'm there. It's like 5 a.m. and I'm going, like, you're not sick. Get up. You're just fucking tired. Go reignite your ritual. Get down there, start a fire, get writing, because you haven't written in a week and it's choking you. And then there's a part of me that's going, you're going to listen to your meditation app. And if you fall back asleep, you're fine. Your body needs its rest. Your facial nerve is still healing and your stenosis is still healing. And and it was this, like, it was like literally like the devil and the angel on each shoulder. But I laid there for 10 minutes and I said, I can do both. And I meditated for a half an hour and then I got up and wrote. And that's the lesson here is
yeah, that's it. You nailed it. It's one of the quotes in the book is, absolutism will destroy us absolutely.
Nice.
And to think that it has to be one way or the other. And we're not talking about, relativism and ethics, but that's a separate conversation. But we're talking about, to think that the human experience is binary is absolutely ludicrous.
Agreed.
And we can do more.
Nice. When does your book come out, buddy?
It's available on Amazon right now for pre-order, and will be released on the 18th of January. Nice.
Second book. What else have you? You're doing a lot of speaking. You started your own company.
Yep. I have a great partner. I have a great partner named James Stagnita, who is a lifelong, spent 30 years coaching at the highest level of collegiate and professional. Nice. He's an incredible coach, and he was doing a lot of this stuff, innately, and then through years of. So he and I have a company, and we get to work with amazing companies, legal firms, and sports teams.
You're still working with kids? You're still working with kids groups, or that got too busy?
I try to, whenever asked, if, especially if I'm in an area and I can do some of that, I really like to. I have noticed, sometimes my stuff is starting to get a little so esoteric that I'm not sure it works that well with kids anymore. They have to be kind of high risk to really get to something that's meaningful.
Right.
But yeah, so I've got that, and building cultures for folks, and the goal is, it's not to be famous, as Odysseus told Achilles, fame is nothing. I want to be able to put food on the table for my children, but at the same time, I really would like to leave the world better than when I came into it.
Nice. Well, you're definitely doing that, man. How do they find you? How do our listeners? I mean, I'll put links in this, but where are you most? Blog, company, LinkedIn, Instagram.
Yeah. So the company is MVP Development Group. So mvpdevelopmentgroup.com. But JC Glick on Instagram, JC Glick on Twitter. And JC Glick on Facebook, and most of my articles and stuff, I try to, if it's on the blog, I also put it on LinkedIn, because I think LinkedIn is kind of where we need to really continue to push the kind of things that you and I are talking about, to people who need it. Nice.
Okay, my friend, it was so good to catch up. Congrats on the second book, and we will let's talk again after that's out.
I'd love to. And thank you. And I want you to know, and I want your listeners to know that, you have been such a huge influence on me and my thinking. And this isn't just because we're good friends. I just, there's very few guys I think of, Stagnita is one of them, but guys like Barry Gents, and you, and McChrystal, those are contemporaries that I look at and I go, man, I could listen to you. There's very few folks today I could listen to for a long period of time, but I listen to you all day, man.
Dude, putting me up there with McChrystal and some of those other people, don't make me blush. But I appreciate that. And, our friendship was born out of a mutual and reciprocal and respectful thing. And I don't want this to be a show where we end up like hugging and crying, but I've sought your counsel many times in my life, and you are a great listener and leader, and looking forward to this next book, and no doubt other books to follow, and us catching up the next time our travel intersects.
I would love that.
Be safe, man.
I would love that. Thank you again for having me.
Hey, JC.